For the junkie, for the geek, that's obviously right here at the Voice of College Football, but it's definitely over on College Football News. There's no question about that. That has been a resource of mine for a long, long time. We got Pete Futak on the line from College Football News. He is the publisher right there. Pete, we appreciate you stopping by.
Hey, enough for the nerd. We're cool. My mom tells me we're cool and that we're pretty. So, but yes, it is for the geeked out fan, and this time of year, that's what it's all about. But soon enough, this all kicks in, and then everyone else starts to care as well.
If you're not a nerd, I'm not a nerd. I'm gonna join you on that front. There we go. I like that.
Sure, we'll not nerd out together here then.
You know, Pete, I said it off the top, and it happens all the time when I need some kind of reference of, okay, I want a quick look at Syracuse football. I want something in between going to Phil Steele and having to read through a code, which he does a masterful job at what he does.
If you unfocus your eyes, you can see a pony in the
yes. If the thing was written out, it would be like 3 feet thick. Or I don't want I already know who the quarterback is, and they got a star running back and Sean Tucker, and I know that I want something a little bit in between, something comprehensive. You guys hit that on point all the time. So just talk about your aim, your mission, your purpose.
It's crazy how this has changed. I mean, we started this up in 1998. And back then is when you did really want like the 10,000 word team previews and the big giant articles and things like that. Now, evolving over the years, everything's faster, faster, faster. Everyone wants to look at stuff on their phone. And, now it's really more geared towards the gambler, as crazy as this is. Like the geeked out college football fan, we have our audience for that, who's certainly going to read every, the Louisiana Monroe previews and all that type of stuff. But really, it's okay. Is Louisiana Monroe's at like 3.5 win total, over or under. That's really where this has started to kick in with us more and more. And it just kind of keeps on going. And now it's our job to do all these different kind of test, book reports on all these teams so we know what we're talking about going forward.
So I got to think, Pete, that you've got a template in regards to, okay, this is what we do in April. This is what we do through spring ball. We're going to get people ready for spring practice. Then we're going to review it. Then we're going to do this. We're going to review schedules. We're going to do like 90% template work. But obviously things happen. Lincoln Riley runs from Oklahoma to USC, and Brian Kelly and all sorts of crazy stuff in college football with NIL and the transfer portal. So how has that changed your work?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, Alabama and Ohio State are probably just going to play for the national championship after all of that. But it's changing. God, speaking of Phil Steele, we joke, but God bless anybody who had to try to write a print preview, because with the transfer portal and with all the other things, these things are changing so fast. And you've got so many different changes now more than ever, where, the transfer portal is the new recruiting, where you're seeing all these different programs, which can go from 0 to 60 fast. Like look at USC, which was already pretty good. Like you mentioned, Lincoln Riley. Well, transfer portal, okay, let's just bring aboard Caleb Williams. Let's bring aboard Jordan Addison and bring aboard all these other, star players who can come in. That combined with NIL and combined with all the other factors here. Now, a lot of this, the average sports fan is not going to care about once the ball gets kicked off. They're not going to care if, Bijan Robinson is doing, Lamborghini shots for the local Austin car dealer or anything like that. But in terms of getting the new talent, it is kind of fun for the fans to be like, have free agency and think, okay, our team just got better because we needed a middle linebacker and we just stole the best one from, Central Michigan to come here. So it really has changed how fast the fortunes of these other teams can really sort of kick in.
Got Pete Futak on the line, College Football News. He's the publisher there. 1998, it got started, and Google knows my habits, so I put in, Purdue Football News, because I do these all day, record with different people, and I want to, be able to review things. No, okay, I'm not missing anything. Not going to ask any dumb questions. Boom, Google knows. Boom, College Football News. It's at the top of the
it has made how much easier has this made our lives? I mean, speaking of 1998. We didn't have, sounds really old here, but we didn't have Google. We had maybe like Netscape and maybe other things that you could try to search up, but there weren't search engines. There weren't things to kind of find. You had to really comb through every single, college athletic website and do all sorts of other things. And now it's so much easier, so much better now, where it is great, where we can just all kind of find all the same information. And our overall goal is just to try to get as close to the pin as possible, but that's so much easier now than it was 20 years ago.
Pete, you mentioned 1998, obviously the dawn of the BCS era. If we go back a little bit before that, throughout the 80s and 90s, I remember picking up preseason publications, and you would look at 3 or 4 different ones, and you would see different top 10s, top 15s in the country. You'd see all sorts of Colorados and Purdue's and Illinois jumping in there, and that was not an odd thing. Now it just seems to be so set with the 2 that you mentioned, Ohio State and Alabama. You got Georgia, of course, Oklahoma. Dominates the Big 12. You've got 4 or 5 teams. Do you think this is good for college football? It just seems to, we've been locked in this for quite some time.
Yeah, there's 2 ways to look at this. No, it's not. It's boring. If it's, I kind of like the whole dynasty sort of thing. I appreciate the greatness that how hard it is to do what Alabama is doing. It's, I know the average sport, like my friends who aren't into college football and love the NFL, it's like, oh, great, Alabama's good again. Yeah, but it's amazing what they're able to do. So in a certain way, that's not good. But to go back to your point of like 1998, consider the life before that, where if it was Alabama 1 and Ohio State 2 to start the season in the Poland Bowl era, and if they didn't lose, it didn't matter if you had, like Kansas State out there that ripped through the schedule, beating everyone 105-0. The top 2 teams, according to the preseason polls, would stay there the entire way through, and there was no mechanism for that. So in that way, because of the college football playoff, it's still a beauty contest. It still needs to be tweaked, but it is a little bit better, where at the very least, Alabama's got to prove that it can win the national championship. It's not a foregone conclusion that they're at least there. I think the next thing that has to happen, and it's going to happen relatively soon, you got to expand the college football playoff. The one major fundamental flaw of my beloved sport is, as we speak right now on, what is it, June, 23rd or whatever it is, we can already pretty much eliminate 80 teams who have no shot, no matter what they do, of getting into the college football playoff, just because of a function of their schedules and all that. And you need to have a way to at least say to a Cincinnati of last year, who did obviously get in, but to every team and say, look, if you win your conference championship, you're going to at least get a chance in some sort of a playoff here. Doesn't mean you're not going to get annihilated 500-3 by, Georgia or whoever it is that you're going to play, but at least you're getting that chance. And that would be a much better thing for college football if, say, in the Big 12 championship last year, when Baylor came up with that stop on Oklahoma State at the 4 inches away, that, okay, you just did it. That was for the Big 12 championship, yay! But you're in the college football playoff now. Or how much better would the ACC championship have been if Kenny Pickett and Pitt versus Wake Forest, if that was for a playoff spot? Again, we're not saying they're going to win the national championship. It's just to get that chance, and that's just what these teams and the fan bases want.
I'm right there with you. So, are you looking at all conference champions get in the Power 5 and an 8-team format?
Yeah, I think it would really expand. I actually don't like most of the proposals that came up, but this one was good that they had coming last year at this time, where they were talking 12 or even 16 teams to do this, where I think you do have to make it so the Power 5 conference champions are all in. You have to have some mechanism where the top group of 5 champion is in, and then a bunch of wild cards from there. And it's still hard to do. It's still really hard to get into the top 12 of the final rankings in a playoff sort of format. So it's not like the NCAA basketball tournament where you can finish 8th in your conference, get hot for 3 weeks, and all of a sudden you're in the Final Four. There still won't be anything fluky about this, so it'll still matter. The big sticking point now is with expansion and with the SEC taking on Texas and Oklahoma, you have all the other conferences that are freaking out. Oh, great, we don't want to have 4 other Power 5 conference champs, 1, random Cincinnati or UCF, and then, 8 other SEC teams in this mix. How do you divide up the revenue? How do you divide this up from there? But there's a way to get this done. And I do actually think a 12-team format is a nice sweet spot between not having too many where it devalues the regular season and yet gives everyone a realistic shot. So we don't have to have the argument. I didn't think Cincinnati belonged in the college football playoff last year, but they should have been in. We should have had that argument. They should have had their shot in this whole thing. But so should Notre Dame or Texas A&M 2 years ago. And that's the way that expanded college playoff would work then.
So you're going to include the group of 5 is the way you would do it. You
at
would
least one of them, yeah.
Include the best group of 5. I liked the proposal. I thought that the proposal hit on all the points that I wanted it to hit on for a 12-team. But the only thing I don't like about the 12-team, Pete, is I don't agree with buys. I think buys work in the NFL because you've substantiated your earning of the buy. But in college football, for a committee to say they got a buy, they don't have a buy, I think it's just a mess. And I think a buy is a huge advantage for a lot of reasons I won't go into right now.
Oh yeah,
we want to hear from you.
No, you're right. It's a massive advantage. However, what they in the first proposal, what they didn't do, which would actually sort of offset that in a weird way, is they weren't going to go with a reseed. And why that would matter is like you could actually be at a disadvantage to be a top 4 team if, say, the 12 beats the 5. And we went through this. I did an article a million, months ago. We kind of looked back and said, okay, how would this have worked? And several times you would have probably had like a Boise State or somebody who probably would have won. And all of a sudden you would have had a really massive imbalance in terms of, who gets it's an advantage to play the 11th seed as opposed to like the number 6 seed. So it would have been a little funky in that way, but I am with you. The thing to remember about any sort of a college football playoff and expansion is that these are inherently bowl people. The only way we got the BCS in the first place is they just designated one extra bowl as a national championship. They didn't change the bowl structure. The only reason why we got a college football playoff is that they changed it and said, okay, well, we're going to have this one extra game at the end, but we're still going to keep the rose and the sugar and the peach. And they kept it in the system as is. So they didn't have to really change much of anything. So as long as you're not changing the infrastructure of the bowl system, this can all work. And so that's why I think it's the very easy solution to all this is have the conference championships the week after. You have some college football playoff smorgasbord of games where you just like on a Saturday just rip right through the first round, and then you start off the bowl games. So you have like Ball State, Utah State in the whatever early bowls. You keep all that system, and then it just stays within the system. So I think that's how they would do this to make sure that there isn't a massive change in the infrastructure. And in that, to keep it 12, you probably do have to have buys for the first round.
Pete Futak, College Football News, joining us, breaking down the game we all love. We're about 75 days away from kickoff. Pete, so for once, the Pac-12 actually took a little leadership in the sport and said, we're going to be the first ones to abolish the divisions and go to a 1 versus 2 seed. Do you like that? And do you want each conference just to do its own thing, or would you like to see uniformity in regards to scheduling, playoff, conference championship game format, the whole deal?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, I do think from a fan perspective, you do want to see more conference games. You'd rather not see, USC play, Colgate or, something, some weird random out of the blue team. So I do think you still have to have some element of non-conference games. But this goes back to the expanded college football playoff, where at the moment, you're insane to play a tough schedule if you're a good team, because we know that we have yet to have a 2-loss team make the college football playoff. So if you have expanded conference schedules and you go 10-2, you're probably going to be out. So if you change that with an expanded college football playoff, so you do have a little bit of a leeway there. So in case you do have a great tein in the SEC, for example, that just so happened to play Alabama and Georgia, and you lose to those two, you shouldn't be punished for that. So I do get it. The difference between getting rid of the divisions is, as a fan, it's fair. It's fine. You do that, though, in the Big Ten, for example. You're never seeing Northwestern, get back to a Big Ten championship. You're never seeing anything funky. You're basically seeing Ohio State and then whatever other good team every single year happens to be the lamb for the slaughter. And for the Pac-12, it would have, if you looked back at how this would have worked, it would have been basically Oregon in the Pac-12 championship every single year. This basically pushes it forward that says, all right, so we're going to get USC in the Pac-12 title every single year unless there's something crazy that happens. So hard to do, but it is kind of the fair way to do this, to make this all about the conferences. And as long as you have a way so that the conference champions can get into a college football playoff, then yeah, the more conference games, the better. It's better than seeing these bad non-conference games that keep showing up.
So, Pete, as we start to get close here, we'll have media days in about a month, and then boom, we'll be off into August camp and right into the season. Beyond the 4 or 5 that dominate the sport, and then we expect to be there at the end, Are there teams, because there's usually a handful of teams that like intrigue me, even if I don't think they have a shot. Like when Mac Brown took over North Carolina, started to get things moving, I was like, I'm going to keep an eye on that. They intrigue me. Are there any teams out there that intrigue you, or maybe moving the needle on the site that are usually off the radar a little bit more?
Well, it's two different things. I could tell you anecdotally that on the site, what does big for us? If we just did the Southern Miss preview, all of a sudden everyone from Southern Miss gets all excited. So everyone's excited about their own teams at this point in terms of getting this all going. But in terms of what intrigues me on a bigger level, it's a lot of the big name programs that are probably hiding just under the radar a bit. I know we joke, but really it's going to be Alabama #1 by everybody. Ohio State's going to be #2 for everyone. Georgia's going to kind of be a default #3. And then it's chaos and game on from there. Is Texas A&M going to rise up? Is this going to be the year that it actually shows up? And then, big blue blood names. USC, how fast does that work? Because if you look at, we talk about the change in the schedules, they don't play Oregon, and I think they miss Washington. So yeah. Washington's going to be better. So I think that they missed the two of the bigger boys in the conference. And if you look at how their schedule, shakes out, that is an 11-1 slate. So if Lincoln Riley, with all that talent, does what he's supposed to do, USC can rise back up like that. On the flip side, look at Oregon. That's a team, they start out the year against Georgia, who rebuilding a little bit, but Oregon's got all the talent in the world. They could pull that off. And if you look at what their schedule is like the rest of it, they're going to be favored in every game the rest of the way. So even if they lose to Georgia, they could still rip through the rest of its schedule. Texas, they've got talent. They're bound by nothing. There is no reason outside of having to play Alabama early on that Texas should not have a monster season. So there are all these big teams that are just sort of right there, but can one of them pop up and be this year's Michigan and get into the Final Four?
I would argue that Penn State was one of the most underachieving teams in college football. Way too much talent on defense and so forth to go 7-6, but they lost a lot of that. And we'll see if James Franklin can earn his contract. Pete Futak, college football news. It's probably already a go-to. If it's not, it should be. Pete, we appreciate you stopping by.
Anytime. Thanks for having me on.